Florida State kick it off this weekend in the Swamp. Joe, I got to admit here, okay, you have two backup quarterbacks that'll be starting this game. Quite honestly, not really what anybody wanted to see. I think everybody wanted to see Jordan Travis continue in this game. We've talked about this a lot with Florida State. We've talked more about Florida State, Joe, over the last 4 days than I feel like that we've talked about them the entire year. Florida also has a backup quarterback situation. With last week, Graham Mertz breaking his collarbone. The Brown kid comes in, who, by the way, I don't think looked bad at all. I do think kind of opened up the offense a little bit when it came to the running game. Here's the problem that I have with both of these teams. I think it's a coin flip game. I have no confidence whatsoever for either team. Let me tell you why. Because I do think that Florida State, the heartbeat of that team, the engine that made that team go was Jordan Travis. Now, everybody's going to come that are Florida State fans and say, Tate Rodemaker's not as bad as you think. That's fine. And I don't think he's as bad as you believe that I'm saying that he is. I don't believe that. But, Joe, everybody around Tate Rodemaker is going to have to get good. And Florida State has not been really good in the running game. And quite honestly, too, Joe, they have not been good at stopping the run. The last 2 weeks, Florida, even though that they got absolutely obliterated by LSU defensively, even though they could not close out the game against Missouri, Joe, they're averaging over 260 yards per game on the ground. They have found something with Etienne, Johnson, and with a little bit in the second half with that Brown kid in the running game. That has been the biggest weakness for Florida State. But here's the thing for me. I don't like, and you know this, I do not like talking about games from last year. So many things have changed from last year. And historically, I don't like looking at what happened a year ago. That game was close. And I think all things being said in this rivalry game, which can get extremely chippy, this game being in the Swamp, Tate Rodemaker making a start in the Swamp for the first time, I don't like it for Florida State. Now, would I be surprised if Florida State won? No. But I got to be real with you, too. I'm taking the upset. I am taking Florida in the Swamp. Billy needs this game to be bowl eligible. And I think the biggest strength from Florida the last couple of weeks, actually, quite honestly, Joe, the last month, is Florida State's biggest weakness, and that is stopping the run. I think they're going to get it done here, mainly due to the fact that I just don't trust a backup quarterback going on the road in the Swamp. I've seen thousands of quarterbacks, maybe not thousands. I've seen hundreds of quarterbacks try to go into the Swamp in a hostile environment, Joe Milton, and not being able to prevail. I'm going to take the Gators in this one.
Blake, you say a lot of things on this show, and we have a lot of productive conversations that I completely agree with.
This is not one of them, I would assume.
Yes, people think that we disagree a lot, and I actually, for the most part, tend to agree with a lot of things that you say. And you're typically very reasonable. But, Blake, you're out of your mind, man. You're out of your mind that you think that there's going to be an upset here. There is absolutely no way. Now, look, if Graham Mertz was playing, you and I would be having a different conversation here. Because as I've come around on Graham Mertz and his impact on this game and the way that he has boosted Florida, a team that has not been steady at all this year, he has been a steady piece for that offense. The Max Brown kid's thrown 12 passes in his career. 12 passes. Tate Rodemaker has actually stepped in and played games. I understand that this game is in the Swamp, and I understand that that is such a difficult place to play. But the fact that Florida is in the same circumstance with a less experienced kid, I have to go with Florida State. Tate Rodemaker is going to step up to the plate here. I think that he's going to have a great game. I saw some of the things you were talking to me about on film, but I feel that he has the talent to prevail and step up, have a very, very big football game.
Joe, I don't hate that. Like, let me make this very well understood. I don't disagree with anything that you just said. Okay. None. Okay. Now, let me make a correction. Florida State's actually 44th in the country in rush defense. Okay. what I've just seen from Florida in the last 2 weeks, they have played 2 top 15 teams. Okay. Now I understand that, and I'm going to say that, Joe, both of those games were on the road. Right. And one thing that I noticed from Florida on film, they are not giving up. They might be a 5-6 football team. You would not know that if you did not know their record, and you would have just seen Florida the last 2 weeks against arguably the best offense in the country in LSU, and then a really damn good offense in Missouri. You would say, you know what, man? I know that Florida just lost back-to-back games on the road, but my goodness, man, they are playing tough. And I will admit, I don't like it for either one of them. If Florida State blows them out, would not surprise me whatsoever. Okay, like I want to make that well known. I think there's something to be said, Joe, in reference to holding Missouri to 33 points and being able to run the football that they've been able to do. Now, let's talk about that Gator defense. I agree with you with Rodemaker because of this. Joe, they're giving up 253 yards on the ground. Now, a lot of that in the last 2 games, that has a lot to do with Jaden Daniels. All right, like a lot of that had to do with Jaden Daniels 2 weeks ago.
Yes.
The problem I have is not what Florida's been able to do in their front seven on the ground, because I think relatively they've been okay there. They faced Jaden Daniels and Cody Schrader, who, by the way, Schrader leads the SEC in rushing. Joe, they're giving up 350 passing yards the last 2 weeks on average. And I'm rounding down, okay?
Mm-hmm.
The question ultimately becomes with me is exactly what you said. Can Rodemaker make plays in the air? Because if he can, this game can separate. But if he can't, and you allow Florida to stay in this game, they're going to wind up you're going to wind up slipping up here. I'm telling you.
And again, I think this is part of where this disconnect is here. I understand what you're saying, and I get that this is a rivalry game. It's one of those instances, kind of like we said with Alabama and Auburn, where anything can happen when this game is played. I just know that one team has found ways to win, and I know that one team has been extremely consistent and has been offensively potent when they need to be. I know that there is a challenge. There is a massive challenge of having to throw Tate Rodemaker into the mix. But my biggest focus here is the fact that Max Brown is being thrown in here. 12 passing attempts under his belt. Goes 4 for 5 against Missouri. One might even argue that the end of that football game against Missouri could have closed it out, but they couldn't move the ball in those final drives to really close that game out. Not totally his fault, but still, not the same offense when Graham Mertz wasn't on the field. We know for a fact, though, that Florida State's secondary is one of the best in the country. Fentrell Cypress, Bernardo Green, Jerry Jones, those corners have been locked down. They have not locked down, but they've been very good against weaker receivers.
Pass defense. They've been really good, yeah.
I don't have enough evidence to even know what Max Brown's going to do when he's asked to make plays. He's a great athlete. I agree with you. He had a nice run in the game, and I think that for him as an athlete running the football, but man, if they got to throw the ball on third and medium, third and long, they're cooked. I think that this thing could be close for the first half, and then Florida State starts to pull away because Rodemaker gets confident, they get into a rhythm, and they start cooking.
One thing that you just mentioned is massive for me in this one, too, that would worry me, okay? Brown was, actually Mertz was the one that was highly ineffective on third down. Okay, the Gators would go 5-11 against Missouri last week. Brown can really run. Okay, now Chris H said calling the Florida running back that Brown kid. He's a quarterback. Yes. He's a white quarterback. Okay, I get what you're saying. Ha 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 ha. I think that not having film on him can help Florida, as crazy as that sounds. Right? Like, I think it could help them a little bit more not knowing what they want to do. I think he's going to run the ball a little bit. Man, I'm telling you, they are running the football at a high rate. And I do think that they're going to try to play keep away. That's Billy's game. And I think that they can play a little keep away. I think they can run on Florida State. Look, one thing I people are not giving Billy Napier a lot of credit for. Joe, the last 2 weeks, and you can say, look, Missouri, think about Missouri. Now, you can say, all right, LSU defensively in the front seven's not good. Fine. I'm with you there. I agree. They're not. Missouri has actually shown that they can be pretty competent. Playing Georgia, playing Tennessee, that front seven's been pretty freaking good, and they ran all over them. They were pushing them around. And I think Billy has found something there. Now, Cody McGee inside the chat sends us a super chat, I should say.
Thank you, Cody.
Sends a $4.99 super chat. He says, I think Billy is coaching for his job. If he doesn't beat Florida State and doesn't get to a bowl game, I think Florida would fire Billy. Thank you, Cody, for the super chat. Joe, do you think that Billy needs to win this game to keep its job? Because I do not.
I don't think so either, because we also have to look at the circumstance. You know, they're throwing a kid that's never really played in. I would think that the administration would be a little bit forgiving of that. But the biggest reason why, typically when coaches get fired at the end of their second year, it's because there has not been any results in recruiting. They have, over the last cycle and this upcoming cycle and the cycle after that, that's 3 straight years of really good recruiting. It would be silly. They've pulled the plug on a couple of guys early.
It would look like Brian Harsin to some extent at Auburn.
That's the example that comes to mind. He got canned, and even Dan Mullen gets canned. Both of those guys are really good examples because they weren't pulling in the recruits. He's probably going to have a really serious conversation with the administration, but his conversation is going to be like, look, I know I haven't been up to standard what you guys are looking for, but once these kids get in here next year, in the next 2 years, we're going to start to turn that corner.
I will admit his seat's getting really hot. Yeah, I'm not saying it's scorching, but man, here's the problem I have with Florida or with Billy. Okay, I know that there's a lot of jokes from Louisiana people because he was at ULL. People call him G5 Billy. They're making a lot of mental mistakes. Like that you can just not make. Not only Joe, can you not make in the Power 5, that you just can't make in the SEC. Like you can't have some of these special teams blunders.
Right.
You can't, and you've recruited a couple 5-stars in the defensive backfield, okay? But there's not really development from the guys that were already there. Like Corey has not developed those guys. And for that reason alone, Joe, if they don't win this game, he's going to have back-to-back losing seasons. I don't know what Florida will do. Now, I don't think he's getting fired. It also would not surprise me if he did, because Florida is a place, Joe, that is yearning for good football. And you know what? I don't even think, Joe, that they're asking for you to make the playoff. What I think that they're just asking is, can we have a winning season? Because when you have 3 seasons that have underperformed, it makes boosters go crazy.
Yeah.
And your job gets up in the air. I do think they give Billy another year. But what is funny, and I don't agree with this take, by the way. Everybody's like, well, look at what Mike Norvell did at Florida State. You got to give him time. Those are 2 completely different things.
Yes.
Completely different. I hate that take. They would have fired Mike Norvell, okay, if they were not still paying Willie Taggart. Let's call it what it is. Florida State fans hate when I say that. You do not have the capital nor the budget to pay 2 head coaches a buyout. You just don't. All right. And then going and getting a third. Bottom line for me is I think Billy is so desperate. I think the swamp is going to be packed. I think that this is a heated rivalry game. I am just going to take the Gators. And listen, I could be so deadly wrong here. But you know what else? You know what else is true too? Before we go to Oregon State? Dude, when are we going to have chaos?
What do you mean? Like, when are we going to have a game that really disrupts?
Yeah, like really disrupts the flow of things. Because we have not had that this year. And is this the week? Is Florida the team that out of nowhere disrupts things? I think that they could. I don't think people give the. It's Joe. It's like You remember, you know how even under Scott Frost, let me throw this example out there. You remember how even under Scott Frost teams would play Nebraska and Scott would lose all those 1-possession games?
Yes.
It's because that stadium was packed and loud and rowdy. All right, that I don't think people realize what it's like going into the Swamp and playing. I've been there, I think, twice.
It's a fair point,
Joe. It is as nuts. Okay, people talk about Death Valley, meaning LSU at night. No question, brother. Go into the Swamp at night and see what happens.
Look, that's the only real redeeming thing for me in this circumstance is that it is being played at Florida. That is a massive boost for them. But I still just don't see it, man. I see a team that even without their starting quarterback, they are one of the few rosters that has 2 top 100 wide receivers. One of them is going to be a top 15 pick. A running back who's going to be a top 100 pick and Keon Coleman.
Mm-hmm.
Trey Benson's going to be a top 100 pick, maybe even higher than that. Jaheim Bell is going to be a top 150 pick. If this was a circumstance, I'm trying to think of a correlative example. If this was Alabama's offense where Jermaine Burton's great, but the receiver talent there, it's nothing crazy. One might argue that if Jalen Milroe went down and Ty Simpson went in, we've seen some murky stuff from Ty Simpson. That doesn't work. That also doesn't work stylistically.
Well, we've also seen it.
But what I'm getting at is the transition for a backup. This is one of the best situations in the country to step into. Like, he is being thrown into a spot where he's got everything going for him. I think you play a bad football game and you can still win if you're Tate Roadmaker, because he's got guys who are going to bail him out on some plays that are going to pick up huge gains.
I can agree with that. And again, it's why I say to myself, okay, again, I
thought we were going to be more heated, man. I thought we were going to be more heated.
Oh,
you texted me last night. I was like, oh, I'm going at him.
But Joe, here's the problem with this. Okay, for me, it doesn't flip a coin.